Evelyn Brooks stepped carefully from the back seat of her black sedan, her heart fluttering with a gentle mix of excitement and unease. She wore a simple gray cardigan over a white blouse, and her silver hair was neatly pinned back. The morning sun shone bright, but she hardly noticed the warmth on her skin. She was focused on the soft click of her heels against the polished sidewalk as she made her way toward the coffee stand at the corner of Peachtree and Marietta. Nearly 60 years ago, Evelyn had started a small company in a cramped attic room. Over decades of long nights and tireless determination, that company had grown into one of the world's most successful mobile payment platforms. Her face had appeared countless times in magazines and on television. But today, dressed in unassuming clothes and carrying only a modest tote bag, she blended easily into the bustling crowd. She had planned this day for weeks. A meeting with an old friend, someone she had not seen since the early days of her business, who had remained in Atlanta while Evelyn's work carried her across continents. She remembered how they used to sit together at a tiny table in a neighborhood cafe, talking about dreams that seemed too big to ever come true. Now older and wiser, she looked forward to reconnecting, to sharing stories of both success and struggle. Her mind drifted back to those early mornings spent designing software in a haze of caffeine and hope. She felt a gentle pride at how far she had come, but also a twinge of sadness at the years spent traveling alone, missing birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet moments of comfort. As she approached the coffee stand, she felt a sudden rush of noise and motion. Cars honked at the nearby intersection. Bus hissed to a stop, its doors folding open to let on passengers in business suits. A street musician played a cheerful tune on a saxophone, the deep, mellow notes floating across the plaza. Colorful banners waved overhead, advertising a local art festival that would start later that afternoon. Evelyn paused for a moment to admire the musician's skill, tapping her foot lightly in time to the melody. It reminded her of a younger portrait of herself, persistent and bold. Refusing to let doubt drown her dreams, she took a step forward. But the crowd seemed to surge, pushing her gently off balance. For a moment, she turned in a small circle, trying to find her bearings. Everything looked familiar, and yet strangely different. Street names she had known for decades seemed to blur together in her memory. The corner bakery she used to visit. 4 fresh croissants had closed long ago, replaced by a sleek new cafe she had never seen. Tree branches had grown taller, and the building seemed to shine brighter with polished glass facades. She reached into her bag for her phone. The screen blinked with notifications, reminders of meetings, messages of congratulations, news articles about her latest charity projects. For a moment, she felt her chest tighten at the weight of her own fame and influence. She pressed the home button and opened her calendar. The address was there in clear text, 1125 Peachtree Street. She closed the phone and looked around. The high-rise to her left bore a large digital sign, but it displayed an advertisement for a new gym, not the company headquarters she sought. She swallowed hard and steadied herself against the cool metal of a street lamp. A faint tremor ran through her hand as she wiped her glasses. Evelyn took a slow breath, reminding herself that she had faced bigger challenges in her life. She had turned a small startup into a global success. She had stood at podiums in front of thousands of strangers, sharing her vision, yet here she was uncertain of which way to go. She glanced down at the name tag pinned inside her cardigan pocket. It read Evelyn Brooks. She had carried that name like a banner through boardrooms and press conferences. Now clutched in her hand, it felt fragile like a small bird, too delicate to hold. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, and she brushed it away quickly. She would not let embarrassment or fear slow her down. She folded her shoulders back and lifted her chin. If she could build an empire, she could find a building on Peachtree Street. Evelyn turned back toward the coffee stand, determined to ask the barista for help. She moved through a cluster of people waiting for their lattes, scanning each face for friendliness. Each person seemed to look through her as if she were invisible. A young man in a suit glanced at her as he ordered, then stepped aside without a word. A mother with a stroller nudged her daughter closer before moving past. Even the barista, busy steaming milk, did not notice Evelyn standing at the counter. Evelyn coughed softly, hoping to catch her attention. The barista jumped at the sound, glanced briefly in her direction, then returned to his work, ignoring her completely. Her throat felt dry. Evelyn reached for the straw of her sad coffee cup. She had grabbed a simple black coffee at a nearby vending machine, but it had spilled. In her rush, leaving a brown smear on her cardigan, she glanced down in dismay and dabbed at it with a napkin from her bag. The stain remained stubborn. She felt small and inadequate as the plaza buzzed around her, full of people who had places to go and lives to lead. She had lost her way in. The city she once called home, her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. She unzipped her tote bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper with the meeting address written in her own careful script. She lay a finger on the words, drawing energy from the familiarity of her handwriting. She would find her friend. She would stand tall again. But when she stood, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The world tilted, and her vision wavered for a moment. She reached out, her fingers searching for something to steady herself. Her hand closed on the curved arm of a metal bench. She let herself guide down to its cool surface, sitting slowly, careful not to let her knees buckle. She exhaled, feeling the rhythm of her breath slow as she focused on the feel of the bench beneath her. Evelyn's mind drifted to memories of her late husband, Jonathan. He had been the first believer in her vision. They had sat together in that attic room, dreaming of a future where people could pay for goods with a tap on their phone. He had held her hand during difficult moments and celebrated with her during the victories. She missed him every day since he passed away 5 years ago. She missed the way he would whisper encouragement in her ear and tell her she could do anything. She closed her eyes and imagined his gentle smile, drawing comfort from a love that had shaped her journey. She opened her eyes to see people walking past without noticing. A cyclist whizzed by, his headphones blocking the sound of Evelyn's soft sigh. A street performer began juggling flaming torches nearby, and a small crowd gathered, clapping and cheering. Evelyn watched the firelight dance on metal, feeling both envy and longing at the energy around her. She wished she could be part of a crowd that welcomed her instead of ignoring her. She wished someone would simply ask, "Are you okay?" Thought of the countless times she had offered help to others around the world through her foundation. She had given scholarships, funded community centers, supported cancer research, and yet here she sat, alone and unnoticed. She straightened her cardigan and picked up her phone again. She tapped the name of her friend, hoping to call him for directions. No. The phone rang once, twice. She put it to her ear. "Jonathan," whispered, realizing her mistake, then laughed quietly at herself. She meant to call Michael, her friend, not her late husband. She tapped the name, Michael Carter. The line clicked. "Hello?" Michael's familiar voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded surprised. "Evelyn, you sounded shaky. Where are you?" Evelyn described her location as best she could, her voice trembling. She realized she wasn't sure which corner she stood on now. Michael promised to find a taxi and come meet her where she was. Evelyn ended the call and folded her phone back into her pocket. She returned to the bench, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. The roar of traffic and chatter of strangers filled her ears.
Ow.
She closed her eyes again and pictured a warm hand taking hers. She imagined that gentle touch guiding her through. The crowd reminding her that she was not invisible. She imagined being seen not as a billionaire in headlines, but as a woman who once dreamed a dream and made it real. She imagined someone caring enough to ask if she needed help. The thought warmed her heart and eased the tight knot of fear in her chest. She sat there, breathing slowly, waiting for the world to notice her hand, for someone to walk into her life and change everything. Evelyn rose from the bench and made her way toward the nearest bus shelter. She felt her legs tremble slightly under the weight of her nerves, but she held her head high. The shelter stood beside a wide sidewalk, its glass walls etched with city maps and smear marks from countless hands. A lonely advertisement for a local theater production faced her, promising laughter and light as sharp contrast to her own growing worry. She stepped inside, pressing her hand against the cool glass. A bus whooshed by seconds later, stopping with a hiss. Doors swung open to let on a few passengers, then closed again as swiftly as they had opened. No one looked her way. She waited. For a moment, listening to the hiss of the air brakes and the chatter of people boarding, a man in a dark suit climbed on, checking his watch as if every second weighed heavily. A woman in a bright red scarf followed, holding a steaming cup of tea. They both glanced at Evelyn's gray cardigan and neatly pinned hair, but kept walking, past her without a word. The woman in red squeezed past, nearly brushing Evelyn's elbow, and offered only a quick, distracted apology before stepping into the bus. Evelyn held her breath, hoping for a kind face. Instead, the doors shut in her sight, and the bus drove away, carrying them to destinations she could not follow. The shelter felt colder now.
Out.
Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, the thin cardigan, offering little warmth against the chill of neglect. She studied the people around her. A delivery man leaned against the wall, scrolling on his phone. He laughed at something he saw, then slipped the phone back into his pocket. Evelyn caught a glimpse of his screen, a chat window with colorful stickers and emojis. She wondered what made him laugh so easily, and she missed that simple joy. She thought of her late husband, Jonathan, whose laughter had once filled quiet rooms and echoed through hallways. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memory wash over her. Then she opened them again, steeling herself against loneliness. A street vendor pushed a cart laden with colorful fruit apples, oranges, bananas neatly arranged in rows. Called out to passersby in a friendly tone that echoed off the glass walls. Fresh fruit for a sunny day. Sweet mangoes, crisp apples, juicy oranges. Yes. His voice was warm and kind, but as people moved past, they only heard the words without pausing. The vendor offered Evelyn a sample slice of watermelon, and she realized with a small start that he had noticed her presence. She shook her head, not trusting her voice to be clear. Perhaps later, she muttered softly, but he just nodded and served the next customer. Evelyn wondered why she felt ashamed to accept his kindness even when she craved it. A sharp breeze swept through the shelter, carrying the distant rumble of traffic and the scent of exhaust mixed with the sweet smell of fruit. Evelyn touched the rim of her glasses, tested them to be sure they were still in place. She had worn them for so many years that they felt like an extension of her face. Now they rested too low, sliding toward the tip of her nose. She pushed them gently up, then adjusted the strap of her tote bag, feeling a small weight of her belongings inside. Her phone, the folded note with the address, a small bottle of water, and a pack of tissues. She had everything she needed, except the courage to ask for help. A group of teenagers ran past, laughing about an inside joke. Their voices rang with carefree energy that older Evelyn had once possessed. She remembered being their age, filling parks with her friends, dreaming of changing the world. Back then, no one shrugged her off. Back then, she felt invincible. She felt the gap between her past and her present widen, and a knot of isolation tightened in her chest. She closed her eyes and counted to 10, focusing on each inhale and exhale. When she opened them, she looked at the shelter's glass walls, hoping to see her reflection. Instead, she saw only layers of fingerprints and smudges that blurred the world outside. Evelyn pressed her palm against the glass, leaving behind a clear circle in the haze. She watched people's feet shuffle past, high heels tapping, sneakers thudding, loafers sliding. No one looked down. No one asked if she was all right. The city seemed to flow around her like water, carrying everyone past without pause. She felt like a rock in a swift river, motionless and alone. She remembered how many times she had bent down to offer help herself, picking up dropped papers, guiding lost travelers in foreign airports, stopping to listen to someone's troubles. She had always believed kindness could bridge any distance. Yet here, her own need for help went unnoticed. A young mother with a stroller paused at the edge of the shelter. Her baby cooed softly, reaching out with tiny fingers. The mother smiled and continued on without a glance at Evelyn, leaving the shelter and its occupant behind. Evelyn watched them go, imagining how she might have helped guide that stroller if the mother had seemed unsure of her way. She pictured herself smiling down at the baby, offering a comforting presence. But the moment passed, and the stroller disappeared into a sea of legs and umbrellas. Evelyn felt a pang of regret. She was always ready to help others, but she had forgotten that she, too, could receive help. Her stomach growled quietly. She realized she had not eaten since breakfast. The vending machine near the bus stop offered bottled drinks and packaged snacks, but she hesitated. Would anyone notice if she stepped outside the shelter to buy something? Would someone stop her and ask to see her ID? Evelyn shook her head. Stop worrying, she told herself. She stood up, taking slow, deliberate steps toward the machine. Each step felt heavy, as if her shoes weighed a ton. She reached into her bag for her wallet and placed a few bills on the counter of the machine. A bag of plain crackers rattled down, and she picked it up, feeling the cool plastic between her fingers. She tore it open and popped a cracker in two. Her mouth, it tasted bland but filled her hunger slowly. She looked back at the shelter, sensing that Michael might arrive any moment. But deep inside, she wondered what would happen if he did not come. The sky overhead held hints of clouds drifting in. A pigeon swooped down, landing on a nearby railing and pecking at crumbs left by the street vendor. Evelyn watched it for a moment, noting its smooth feathers and bright eye. The bird seemed fearless, strutting in a busy place where no one noticed it either. She smiled at the pigeon, imagining it as a fellow lonely soul. We're in this together, she whispered. The pigeon flapped its wings and took off, vanishing into the gray-blue sky. Evelyn felt a tear slip down her cheek once more. She brushed it away, then folded her hands in her lap as she sat back down on the bench in the shelter. Time passed slowly. Evelyn counted the minutes by the changing light, how the sun shifted shadows across the pavement, how the city's rhythm alternated between rush and lull. She thought of her friend Michael, who had promised to come. Would he remember? Would he find her? Her phone lay silent in her bag, as if it, too, had given up on her. She pictured herself reaching inside and pressing the button to call him again. But pride choked her. She did not want to call more than once and seem helpless. She had built her reputation on strength and vision. Now she felt small and vulnerable. A sudden flash of red caught her eye. A man in a courier uniform jogged past, tripping on a loose paving stone. He stumbled, arms flailing, and nearly fell. Evelyn sprang up without thinking and reached out a hand. He caught himself on her shoulder, steadying his balance. He blushed, muttering an apology, then darted away before she could speak. Evelyn watched him disappear, heart pounding. She had helped someone and they had not even registered her presence. She felt a curious mix of satisfaction and sadness. She had done what she could, but no one had done the same for her. Her stomach tightened with renewed worry. The city felt colder now, as if its warmth had drained away when the sun tilted toward afternoon. Evelyn closed her eyes, pressing her hands together in her lap. She imagined herself as she once was, confident, fearless, unstoppable. She envisioned the beginnings of her company, typing code by candlelight, dreaming of a world changed by her ideas. She remembered Michael's friendship then, how he always believed in her even when she doubted herself. She opened her eyes and whispered his name, a small prayer on her lips. "Michael," she said softly, "I'm here." She waited, ears straining for the sound of footsteps, someone coming to take her hand, someone willing to guide her home. ChatGPT said. Aaliyah Johnson zipped up her yellow raincoat and stepped onto the sidewalk, her school backpack bouncing lightly on her shoulders. The air smelled fresh from an earlier drizzle, and puddles sparkled in the late afternoon light. She hummed softly, thinking about her mother's warm soup waiting at home. As she passed a bus shelter, she caught sight of an old woman sitting on the bench, her eyes distant and worried. The woman's gray cardigan looked damp at the sleeves, as if she had lingered too long in the mist. Her silver hair drifted across her forehead, and her glasses sat crooked on the bridge of her nose. Aaliyah paused, heart tugging at her chest. She remembered her teacher saying, "Always notice someone who seems alone." So she stepped closer, smiling gently. "Excuse me, ma'am," Aaliyah said, keeping her voice soft. "Are you okay?" The woman startled, blinking at the schoolgirl's bright eyes. For a moment, she seemed lost between surprise and relief. Then she nodded, her hand trembling as she lifted it in a silent greeting. Aaliyah crouched down so they were eye to eye. My name is Aaliyah, the girl said. Her coat was sunny against the gray glass walls. What's your name? The woman hesitated, then smiled weakly. I'm Evelyn, she replied. The single word seemed heavy, as if it carried years of memories and meaning. Aaliyah reached out without waiting, gently taking Evelyn's hand. Evelyn felt a spark of comfort at the warm pressure of Aaliyah's small fingers. She cleared her throat. I'm a bit lost, she said. Aaliyah nodded, glancing at the maps etched on the shelter walls. I can help, she offered. She pointed to the street names. This is Marietta Street, and that corner over there is Peachtree. Where do you need to go? Evelyn unfolded the paper in her tote bag. Her fingers shook slightly as she smoothed it out. 1125 Peachtree Street, she read aloud. Aaliyah pressed her lips together, thinking, That's a few blocks that way, she said, pointing east. I'm walking home that way too. I can walk with you. She stood and slipped an arm around Evelyn's elbows, steadying her. Stepped out of the shelter together. Aaliyah moved slowly so Evelyn could keep up. Cars rolled by, and the city's sounds buzzed around them. Yet Evelyn felt protected in Aaliyah's bright presence. She leaned into the girl's side, drawing courage from her kindness. Thank you, Evelyn whispered as they walked. Aaliyah kept her eyes forward but glanced at Evelyn. You look cold, she said. She reached into her own coat pocket, pulled out a pair of soft gloves. I have an extra pair. Here. Evelyn accepted them gratefully and slid her fingers into the wool. The gloves felt like a gentle hug, warming her hands and her heart. As they turned onto Peachtree, Aaliyah asked, Do you live nearby? Evelyn shook her head. I'm here to meet an old friend, she explained. Michael Carter. We used to work together when my company was small. We talked about big dreams in a tiny cafe. Aaliyah listened, eyes wide with curiosity. Did your company do? Aaliyah asked. Evelyn smiled at the question, remembering the excitement of her early days. We made it possible to pay for things with a tap on your phone, she said. At first, people thought it was a silly idea. They said no one would use it, but Michael believed in me. They passed a row of shops, their lights coming on. As dusk approached, Aaliyah pointed to a bakery's display window filled with warm breads. My mom loves this place, she said. She says their cinnamon rolls could make anyone happy. Evelyn chuckled at the thought. They do look inviting, she admitted. Aaliyah steered her to the crosswalk. The light turned green, and they stepped across together. Cars braked gently, and the drivers waved thanks. Evelyn noticed how people smiled at Aaliyah's bright coat and nodded at her kindness. It warmed her to see this young girl shine in the city's bustle. As they walked, Evelyn felt brave enough to share more, spoke quietly of her late husband, Jonathan. He helped me believe in my vision, she said. We spent nights working together, planning every detail. He was my first supporter, my best friend. Aaliyah's hand squeezed hers. I'm sorry, the girl said softly. Evelyn exhaled slowly. It's okay, she replied. He lived a good life. I carry his memory with me. The streetlights flickered on overhead, and Evelyn gazed at the glow dancing on the wet pavement. She felt a tender ache, missing Jonathan's. Gentle smile, but also a warm gratitude for the love they had shared. They stopped in front of a tall glass building with the numbers 1125 shining above the entrance. Evelyn's heart fluttered. This is it, she said, pointing at the revolving doors. Leah grinned. I'm glad I could help, she said. Evelyn bent down and hugged her. Aaliyah laughed, hugging back tightly. Evelyn looked into Aaliyah's eyes and saw kindness and courage. She knew this moment would stay with her forever. You've done more than help me find my way, she told the girl. You reminded me that people still care. Aaliyah blinked. I just did what felt right, she said. Evelyn smiled and reached into her tote bag. She pulled out a crisp envelope with a school logo. Here, she said, handing it to Aaliyah. The girl opened it and gasped. Inside was a scholarship award letter. You were invited to join the Young Leaders program, Evelyn explained. This will pay for your school supplies and extra classes. You earned it by your kindness today. Tears filled Aaliyah's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Evelyn nodded. Keep being kind, she said. You have a gift. Aaliyah tucked the envelope into her pocket. She looked proud and happy. They stepped inside the building together. A receptionist greeted Evelyn by name, offering her a seat in the lobby. Evelyn turned back to Alia. "Will you stay for a moment? I want everyone here to know who you are." Alia nodded shyly and stood beside Evelyn. As people passed by, Evelyn introduced Alia and told them how she had helped an old, lost woman. Each person smiled and offered thanks. Alia blushed but stood tall. Evelyn's heart swelled with gratitude. She felt seen and valued, not for her wealth or fame, but for the human connection she had found again. When Michael Carter arrived, he rushed forward, relief flooding his face. He shook Evelyn's hand warmly, then turned to Alia. "Thank you for bringing her here," he said. "You have done a great thing." Alia grinned shyly. Michael shook her hand too, and Evelyn joined them, standing between her friend and the girl who had changed everything. As they walked into the conference room, Evelyn glanced back at Alia one last time. The girl waved, her yellow raincoat bright against the lobby's muted tones. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears of joy. In that moment, she understood something new. True success is not counted in dollars or headlines, but in acts of kindness and the bonds we share. She knew her life would never be the same again. A photo of Evelyn and Alia appeared online within minutes. A local blogger had captured the moment they entered the glass lobby together. Hands joined, faces lit with relief and warmth. The image spread across social media like wildfire. People marveled at the contrast between the frail, silver-haired woman in her modest clothes and the bright young girl in a yellow raincoat. Many paused to wonder why no one had helped Evelyn until that instant. Comments poured in some expressed shame for ignoring her. Others praised Alia's kindness, and still more reflected on their own busy lives that made them overlook someone in need. News outlets picked up the story. A reporter from the city. Paper arrived at Evelyn's downtown office to interview her about the unexpected turn of events. He found her seated in a bright conference room, a cup of tea steaming at her side. She smiled gently when he asked how she felt about the attention. In simple words, she said that she never wanted recognition, only that people learned to see each other. She spoke of how easy it is to move through a crowd without noticing the person next to you. She spoke of how small acts of care can echo far beyond a single moment. The reporter listened intently and wrote her words carefully, capturing the genuine warmth in her voice. The next morning, Evelyn's phone buzzed with messages. Michael Carter sent a note saying he was proud of her for turning a difficult moment into a lesson for the city. Her assistant forwarded invitations to speak at community events about kindness and social awareness. A local school invited her to address students about empathy. Evelyn considered each invitation thoughtfully. She knew she could do more than offer money. She could share her own story to inspire change. Meanwhile, at Alia's school, the principal made a special announcement. During the morning assembly, teachers, students, and parents gathered in the gym. The principal spoke of Alia's courage in reaching out to a stranger. He told the students how a simple question, "Are you okay?" had led to a scholarship, widespread admiration, and a renewed focus on compassion in the community. He asked everyone to think of ways they could notice someone in need, whether a classmate struggling with homework or an elderly neighbor walking home. The students burst into applause for Alia, who stood shyly at the front, her cheeks glowing. She waved softly, holding the scholarship letter tied with a yellow ribbon. Back in the city plaza, people who had once hurried past Evelyn now recognized her. A man selling newspapers paused and called her by name, apologizing for not stopping. Earlier, he offered her a free copy and she smiled warmly, thanking him for both the paper and the apology. A barista from the coffee stand came out to say she was sorry, handing Evelyn a fresh cup on the house. She told Evelyn that she wished she had looked up when Evelyn first stood at the counter. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on the barista's arm and told her it was never too late to help someone. A delivery woman in a bright green uniform held out an envelope. She explained that she had carried Evelyn's scholarship letter to the school herself because she recognized her from the news. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears at this extra kindness. She realized that people could change even if they stumbled at first. She saw that awareness could spread just like her story had spread online. She felt hope stirring in her chest. That afternoon, Evelyn visited the city hall at the invitation of the mayor. In a small ceremony, the mayor thanked Alia and presented her with a Citizen of Kindness pin. He spoke about how the city often measures success by growth and profit, but true progress comes from how people treat one another. The room was filled with council members, social workers, and local business owners. All listened as Evelyn spoke again, this time in a more formal tone, urging officials to create programs that encourage volunteerism among students and mentorship for seniors living alone. She suggested a Notice Your Neighbor campaign, where people learn to look up, make eye contact, and offer help when they see someone in need. The applause was warm and sincere, echoing off the tall wooden panels. Meanwhile, social media continued to buzz. A hashtag began trending. #SeeEachOther. People posted photos of themselves helping neighbors carry groceries, checking on elderly relatives, or volunteering at community centers. Some schools shared stories of students pairing up to visit seniors in retirement homes. A local radio station interviewed families who had been inspired by the movement, describing how a small conversation at a bus stop had changed their perspective on day-to-day life. Back at her office, Evelyn watched these stories on a large screen in her meeting room. She felt a deep sense of responsibility. She decided to do more than speaking engagements. She asked her team to develop a small community fund to support local kindness projects, buying groceries for families in need, funding after-school programs that paired seniors with students for tutoring, and organizing neighborhood walking groups. She wanted to invest in connections, not only technologies. She imagined a city where people slowed down just enough to notice one another. That evening, Aaliyah sat at her kitchen table, doing homework by the light of a small lamp. Mother stood nearby, preparing dinner. Aaliyah told her mother about the ceremony at City Hall and the pin she had received. She spoke excitedly about how many people had heard her story and were talking about kindness. Mother hugged her tightly, telling her how proud she was. She reminded Aaliyah that real change often starts with one brave act. Aaliyah nodded, feeling both proud and humbled. She thought of Evelyn's soft voice and the grip of her elderly hand. She knew she would carry that moment with her always. That night, Evelyn returned to her modest home on the city's edge. It was a simple apartment, far from the luxury she could afford, but it felt like a refuge. She turned on the kettle and made herself a cup of chamomile tea. She sat by the window, looking out at the streetlights and the cars that still hurried past. She felt contentment wrap around her like a warm blanket. She reflected on how a moment of vulnerability had become a spark for a movement, of Aaliyah's bright yellow coat and the courage it took for a young girl to step forward. She thought of the blogger who had shared the photo, the reporter who had told her story faithfully, the mayor who had listened, and the countless strangers who had since decided to see each other. In her mind, Evelyn whispered a quiet thank you to each of them. She felt a gentle resolve to keep going, to use her resources and her voice to build bridges rather than walls. She thought of the day ahead, meetings with her team, calls to community leaders, planning for the new fund. Yet she also thought of something else, a plan to visit the local school, not as a billionaire, but as a mentor. She wanted to talk directly to young students, to encourage them to be the eyes and ears of compassion in their neighborhoods. As she finished her tea, she placed the empty cup on the saucer and stood. She picked up a framed photograph from the mantel, a picture of her and Jonathan in that tiny attic office, both smiling at the camera, surrounded by papers and soldering tools. She ran a fingertip across the glass. She whispered softly, "We did it, my love." The room felt filled with warmth and possibility. Evelyn turned off the lamp and walked to her bedroom. She paused in the doorway and looked back at the picture. One more time, drew a deep breath, and switched off the light. In the gentle darkness, she felt a quiet hope. She knew that tomorrow held new challenges and new opportunities to touch lives. And she felt ready to meet them, hand in hand with everyone who had learned at last to see each other. Evelyn stood at the front of the bright, sunlit room, her heart full of warmth as she watched Aaliyah step forward. The conference room buzzed with gentle chatter as colleagues from her company, local business leaders, and community members found their seats. Long table lined one wall, covered with simple white cloths and topped with small bouquets of fresh flowers. A soft hum of voices filled the air until Evelyn gently tapped her cup on the table. The room quieted almost instantly. She smiled at Alia, who stood at the side, clutching a crisp envelope. Evelyn began in a calm voice. She spoke of how quickly a single act of kindness can ripple through a busy city, touching lives in ways we cannot imagine. She told the audience how Alia's simple question, "Are you okay?" it led to a lesson for everyone about noticing the people right next to us. As she spoke, her silver hair caught the light and her warm eyes shone with gratitude. Alia listened, her small frame straight and proud, her yellow raincoat folded neatly in her bag.
Ow.
When Evelyn finished speaking, she turned to Alia and lifted the envelope. The room leaned forward in curious silence. "This," Evelyn said, softly, "is our way of saying thank you." She handed the envelope to Alia, whose eyes widened. The girl's fingers trembled as she opened it. Inside was a scholarship certificate, decorated with a simple gold seal. The words "Young Leaders Scholarship" gleamed on the page. Alia lifted her head, and tears of joy filled her eyes. The room burst into warm applause. Leah blinked hard, a shy smile spreading across her face. She took a small step forward and turned to Evelyn. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice steady, despite the tears. Evelyn reached out and placed a gentle hand on Alia's shoulder. "Your kindness has changed my life," Evelyn said, "and I hope this scholarship helps you change the world too." The two of them looked at each other, sharing a moment that bridged generations. After the applause died down, Michael Carter, Evelyn's old friend and business partner, stood and walked over. He lifted his coffee cup in a small salute and said to Alia, who reminded us that compassion is the strongest currency we have. The guests raised their cups and echoed the salute. Evelyn felt a warmth in her chest as she joined, grateful for Michael's support and for the community gathered around them. As the ceremony came to a close, people drifted forward to offer their congratulations. Alia was surrounded by her new friends' company employees, local teachers, and social workers, each smiling and telling her how proud they were. She shook hands and accepted hugs, her face shining with pride. Evelyn watched her, feeling a tender joy at how far the girl had come in such a short time. Later, the crowd moved to the small refreshment table at the back of the room. Evelyn and Alia stood together, sipping fruit juice from clear glasses. The sound of soft music drifted from hidden speakers. Evelyn noticed how icily Alia spoke with the other guests now, her initial shyness replaced by confidence. She talked about her favorite subjects at school, her love of reading, and her wish to become a teacher one day. Evelyn nodded, listening with genuine interest. When the room began to empty, Evelyn gently guided Alia aside. "Would you like a tour of my office?" Alia's eyes lit up. They walked together through sleek corridors lined with photos of past company projects and pictures from charitable events. Evelyn pointed out the spot where she had signed the first contract in her career and the window where she had once gazed out, dreaming of the future. Alia listened with wide-eyed wonder. At the end of the tour, they reached a quiet corner with large windows overlooking the city. The late afternoon sun cast long golden rays across the glass. Evelyn turned to Alia and said, "This city changes every day. New buildings, new people, new ideas. But the true heart of the city is its people. That is why your kindness matters so much." She paused and added, "No matter how busy life gets, I hope you always remember to look up and see the person next to you." Alia nodded, her eyes reflecting the sunlight like two bright gems. "I will," she promised. "I want everyone to feel seen." Evelyn smiled and squeezed her hand. "And you will help make that happen." They stood together, two souls, connected by a simple question and a shared moment of compassion. That evening, Evelyn returned to her downtown apartment. She set the scholarship certificate on her small desk, next to framed photos of her late husband and her early entrepreneurial days. She sat in her favorite chair and closed her eyes, replaying the day's events in her mind. She felt a deep peace settle over her. In her silence, she whispered a quiet prayer of thanks for Alia's courage, for Michael's support, and for the community that had embraced the lesson of kindness. Meanwhile, Alia walked home under a sky painted with shades of pink and orange. She held the scholarship certificate carefully, as if it were made of glass. She thought of her mother's proud smile, of the assembly at school where she had been celebrated, and of Evelyn's gentle words. She felt as if she were carrying a small flame of hope one she intended to share wherever she went. The next morning, Alia placed the scholarship certificate on her kitchen table. Her mother brewed a fresh pot of tea, and they sat together, talking quietly about the day ahead. Alia said she wanted to use part of the scholarship to buy books for her class's reading corner. Her mother smiled and said, "That is a very kind idea." Alia nodded, her face serious with determination. Across town, Evelyn prepared for her first meeting as director of the new community fund. She reviewed notes from her team and drafted plans for upcoming events, neighborhood block parties, volunteer training sessions, and student senior mentorship programs. She arranged for Alia to speak at the next city council meeting, sharing her experience with other young people. Evelyn wanted to ensure that the spark of kindness stayed alive and grew into something lasting. Later that afternoon, Evelyn received a call from her assistant. Alia had arrived at her office unexpectedly, holding a stack of small handmade cards. Evelyn invited her in, and Alia stood at the doorway, her arms full. Each card featured a thank you note from students and teachers at her school, written in bright crayons and decorated with stickers. Alia placed them carefully on Evelyn's desk. "These are for you," Alia said softly. "They wanted to say thank you for the scholarship and for everything you taught us about kindness." Evelyn felt tears gather in her eyes. "Gee." "Read a few cards aloud, messages like you showed us how to care. Thank you for helping me find courage, and I will always help others." Evelyn thanked Alia and hugged her tightly. That moment she knew the true power of their connection. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the office windows, Evelyn and Alia sat together at the desk, talked about dreams of Evelyn's vision for a more compassionate city, and Alia's desire to become a teacher who inspires kindness in her students. Plans formed between them, ideas that felt both simple and grand. They talked about hosting reading circles, organizing neighborhood cleanup days, and starting a pen pal program between young and old. When it was time to leave, Alia stood and gathered her coat. Evelyn walked her to the door, placing a warm hand on her shoulder. "Remember," Evelyn said, "you have the power to change lives, one small act at a time." Alia nodded and smiled. "I will never forget," she promised. As Evelyn watched the girl disappear into the evening light, she felt a deep certainty in her heart. True wealth, she realized, was not dollars or fame. It was these connections, handshakes, shared stories, caring hearts, and with each act of kindness, the world grew a little brighter. She turned back to her desk, ready to continue. The work that had begun with a single question and a small, brave hand reaching out